I'm James Lynch, and this is my stock report for UFC Mexico City, where I talk about the biggest winners and losers on the card. And to me, the fighter whose stock went up the most on this event, we're going to start with the big winners here, to me was Brian Ortega. I think this is kind of a no-brainer for most people watching this, but let's look at the optics going into the fight. Let's talk about what happened before the fight, and we'll talk about the fight itself. So Brian Ortega, going into this fight, was a betting underdog on the judges, or on the odds makers, I should say, going into this. And he hadn't fought since the Rodriguez fight in July of 2022, where he suffered that shoulder injury. So huge layoff coming in. Ortega's not getting any younger. Rodriguez having a couple fights in between, so a little bit more active. And not to mention, I know Ortega, speaks Spanish and is Mexican, but Rodriguez is actually from Mexico, so you'd imagine the fans are on his side. So going in, tall task here, trying to take out Yer Rodriguez. And we notice right before the fight starts, Ortega having an issue, I believe, with his ankle going into the fight. So you're thinking, man, this can't get any worse for Brian Ortega. He's also got his ex-girlfriend in attendance. Like, there's a lot of things going into this fight, right? And what does Ortega do? He survives that first round. And going into the second round, third round, Ortega starts to turn it around, eventually submitting Rodriguez himself. You can see it there. He's a plus 125 underdog in this spot here. And he's just, I think, the third fighter to finish Yer Rodriguez in the UFC, if I'm not mistaken. That's just some quick math off the top of my head. I know Frankie Edgar was one of them. I know Volk was the other. So Ortega joins that class, right? I don't think Rodriguez has been finished since then. Just going to double check that. Got finished in 2012, but you kind of get where I'm going with this here. He's a tough guy to take out. So for me, it's not only the fact that Ortega won this fight, it's the fact that he finished it as well. And you add in the fact that, again, he's been off for a while, but now with a win like this, finishing Rodriguez, and you think of the guys that Rodriguez has fought where he hasn't been finished, like a Max Holloway, for example. Ortega puts himself in a very, very, very nice spot here. And, right now we're trying to figure out what's next for Ilia Topuria. Personally, I think Ortega needs another win after this because, he's coming off two losses, right? He's got the loss to Volkanovski and the loss to Rodriguez. I think he needs one more, but timing's everything. And the UFC might say, hey, look, we've got Brian Ortega here, who just came off a big win. He's ready to go, although I think Ortega's going to need some time off. But, he might be next for the title, even over a guy like Ivoyev. I personally think Ivoyev deserves it next, but, they might go that route because they screwed up by making that Max Holloway fight with Justin Gaethje. So don't be surprised if Ortega inserts himself potentially into a title shot here just because of how big this win was last night. So, in my opinion, the biggest winner on this card was Brian Ortega because, prior to this, we weren't really even thinking title shot. Now I think he has made a bit of a case for a title shot here, although, again, I would go with Ivoyev in that one. Okay, so that's the biggest riser in my opinion. The other big riser on this card, we have to go with Brandon Royval. This was a big win for him too. Coming off that title loss to Alexander Pantoja. Royval was in this kind of this like Rich Franklin, Jose Aldo types or Max Holloway type spot where, he had lost twice to, certain fighters, had he lost to Brandon Moreno again, that would be two losses for him. He'd be in this really bad spot. And then he's already lost twice to Pantoja. So Royval puts himself in this, this kind of weird predicament here, but he gets the win. And again, he was an underdog going into this fight. There was a lot of people. I didn't see actually really anyone picking Brandon Royval. And if you did, all the credit to you here. But you can see there, plus 240 underdog. Personally, I didn't bet this fight. I took the over, and that ended up paying off here. But Brandon Royval gets it done. I know there's some questions about what rounds were scored for who. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I thought Moreno won 1 and 2. I thought 3, 4, and 5 were Royval. I thought he got it done. I think it was a well-deserved win for him here. We'll talk a little bit more about Brandon Moreno a bit later, but Royval's stock rises absolutely. But the problem is he's not going to fight Pantoja next. At least I don't think so. I don't think the UFC. We just had that fight in December. And by the way, I haven't watched any post-fight stuff. I just literally watched the fights this morning and jumped into this. So I don't know if they said anything about what's going on with the flyweight title. I know Royval, I'm sure, is ready to go and take that fight potentially at UFC 301 because that card's in Brazil. But yeah, Royval stock absolutely has to be one of the highest ones on here because had he lost this fight, he's in this weird spot where he's lost twice to two title contenders, or current champion and then another title contender in Moreno. So Royval definitely puts himself in a good spot here. Royval is definitely one of the big winners on this card. And then the last one I'll go with, and again, you can disagree with me or agree with me in the comments, doesn't matter to me, but I thought Hector Barcelos, this was an underdog going into this fight. Barcelos coming off a couple losses here, and you know what? He gets it done. Regardless of what you thought of the fight leading up to that, the fact that he gets that third round submission was huge for him, coming off 2 straight losses. If Barcelos had lost this third fight, he's going to get cut. He's 36 years old. He lives to see another day here, and Quinones is a good prospect, good up and comer in this fight. and Barcelos went out there and got it done in this fight. So yeah, I think Barcelos, again, one of the big winners on this card too, just because he basically kept his job. I'm assuming they're going to keep him around unless he's a free agent. I'm not sure what the contract status is there for Hector Barcelos, but he's got to be one of the big winners there as well. And then just as an honorable mention, we'll go Daniel Zellhuber. I know he was favored coming into this fight, but Zellhuber, in my opinion, 24 years old, 3 straight wins now since that disappointing loss to Trey Ogden. That's good to see. He's a guy that the UFC, is going to be using for those Mexico City cards going forward. So Daniel Zellhuber, another big winner on this card. Okay, let's get to the stock droppers on this card. And I think it's pretty obvious here. Brandon Moreno, to me, stock dropped the most on this because now he's in a weird spot because he just lost to Brandon Royval. They're not going to do any sort of rematch or anything anytime soon, right? I think they've done enough rematches with Brandon Moreno. He lost to Pantoja. Like, the idea is that he could beat Royval and then he could get that rematch with Pantoja, no problem, but he lost this fight. So now where does he go from here? He's kind of in this weird spot where, he's got to beat a couple guys now to get back to title contention, because when you lose 2 in a row like he has, you're not just going to get one win and get right back in the driver's seat. At least I don't think so. So to me, this was a missed opportunity here for Brandon Moreno. Again, he's got to put it into another gear in those later rounds, and I thought Royval sort of had the better of him in those later rounds as well. So to me, Brandon Moreno, biggest stock dropper on this card, just because a win would have got him another title shot. A loss now, he's not even in that contender spot. He needs a couple wins, I think, to get back up there. So Brandon Moreno, my biggest stock dropper on this card. And another one we got to mention as well is Yer Rodriguez. I hate to go for the obvious here, but I mean, you had Ortega was injured going in. You had him beat in that first round. I mean, this could have easily been a Yer Rodriguez first round finish in this fight, and then there would be no questions. There wouldn't even be talking about Ivoyev. They'd just be like, yeah, it's Rodriguez and Ilia Topuria. No brainer. Remember all the buildup last week as well between Rodriguez and Ilia Topuria? It seemed like it was all written that it was going to happen this way, but he didn't get it done. And now we got to look at the fact that Yer Rodriguez at 31 has got 2 straight losses here. He's 2-2 in his last 4. 2-3 in his last 5. Where does Yer Rodriguez go from here? This is a tough loss for him to take. I know featherweight, if you kind of look at the top, it kind of separates a bit after that. There's definitely some fun matchups there for Rodriguez going forward, but it's going to be interesting to see where he goes from here, because we've always sort of thought as Rodriguez as being a contender now. Now that you lose 2 fights in a row like this, especially getting finished in both those fights, it's really tough to say where he goes from here. So, maybe I'll on the recap show, I'll talk a little bit more about what should be next for the winners and losers, but Yer Rodriguez's stock definitely went down after that loss on Saturday. And then another one I'll throw in here, not that he had much stock going in, but I got to mention Dennys Bonder. You remember a couple fights ago, he had a really good win. Who was it against? I was trying to remember. He had, again, like that tough luck against Malcolm Gordon, but he actually looked good early in that fight. And yeah, that's 3 straight losses, and he's probably getting cut here. So, I mean, we have to put him on this list just because I think come this week, he's not going to be a member of the UFC roster anymore. He was an underdog coming into this fight, right? I believe the odds were favoring Rodriguez in that one. Yeah, it was just a slight underdog, but I think a winnable fight for him, and he didn't get it done. So Dennys Bonder, another one whose stock definitely dropped. And then as far as honorable mentions here, I don't like doing this too much, but I got to go with a winner on this card, and that's Felipe Dos Santos. He did win the fight. I don't think he won, though. I think the judges got this one wrong. Let me know what you think in the comments. Would love to hear from you. But Felipe Dos Santos, coming off that performance against Manel Copper, you thought, okay, this guy's got a lot of hype, after that, because it was one of those losing efforts where you felt like, man, I'm going to pay attention to this guy going forward. He looked great, but I thought he lost this fight, and this was a fight that he was favored in, and he didn't look like it at all. I know he ended up getting the win, but he didn't look like minus 300 in this fight. This looked like a pick'em. Poor Victor, I thought he won this fight, no problem. So, yeah. Again, Dos Santos on his record will have a win here. He'll get the first UFC victory of his career, but I thought he lost the fight, and I think, if anything, you have to talk about his stock going down a little bit. I think if you're betting him going forward, you got to be a little bit careful about what happened last night on the fight. So I want to know what you guys think in the comments section below. Who are some of your stock risers and stock droppers on this card? I always like to hear different opinions here, different options. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I didn't. Maybe you agree with me. Well, either way, I would like to hear your feedback in the comments. We're going to keep this segment going on this channel. People seem to like it, so it looks like it'll be sticking around for a little bit longer. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.